Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 5 boxes of Russian operas. And for this video, first of all, I absolutely must give a shout out to my sister Jody, who lives in Milan and who came up, first of all, with the idea for this fabulous new t-shirt, Make America Classical Again. My sister has always been one to make lemonade out of lemons, and this is no exception. She was also a Russian major, a Russian literature major, a Russian film. She knows everything about things Russian. And so not only is the shirt appropriately read, but the topic, Russian opera, is appropriate to her area of interest, although opera wasn't exactly her area of interest. But we did go to see a wonderful performance together of Pikava Dama, Queen of Spades, at the Met, and we had an absolutely swell time. Boy, is that a good opera. It's amazing to me that people don't know it as well as they should. But now we have 5 boxes of Russian operas. You know, it is astonishing to me that aside from a couple operas by Tchaikovsky and maybe Boris Godunov, nobody really knows these works. And they deserve to be performed. They deserve to be known. They are wonderful, wonderful pieces. And I just don't buy the idea that people don't listen to them because they're in Russian. First of all, Russian is a gorgeous language. It is a beautiful language. It is a much better language than German. I have no doubt about that. The only reason people put up with German is because it was great music. They were German, so it's in German. But you see, that's the whole point. So if the music's great, who cares what language it's in? That's number one. I mean, number two, you could argue that the issue has been the dearth of singers willing to sing it. But these days in the international opera circuit, that shouldn't be so much of a big deal. And of course, the conductors have always been there. We've always had a surfeit of extraordinarily talented Russian conductors. So why don't we do these operas? Well, the obvious reason now is that people just won't go see them, and they won't be a box office success. But that, to my mind, is simply a failure of promotion. Because, you know, if people will go see Eugene Onegin or Queen of Spades, they'll go see these things. You just have to convince them that they should go. And that is the job of the performing arts organizations. And for too long, performing arts organizations basically sit on their asses and say, "Hi, we're your local performing arts organization. We are God's gift to culture. Give us piles of money. Come and support us if you're wealthy. If you're not wealthy, we really have no interest in you and don't feel we need to do anything to try and encourage the unwealthy to come see our stuff." And the fact of the matter is, the unwealthy, that is the rich, may often be interested in culture and in supporting culture, but when it comes to actually having to consume it, that is, spend hours sitting there watching it and listening to it, well, they're not always so interested. And they're interested in, of course, the few big names that they've bothered to get to know. And the rest of it they couldn't care less about. And so, therefore, the large performing arts organizations do not do operas which are off the beaten path as often as not. Although it's starting to change a little bit as we just have so many performing arts organizations all scrabbling for the same piece of the pie that they have to diversify themselves a little and get creative. And part of that creativity occasionally is to perform a Russian opera or two. And maybe some of these will become part of them. But I want to go through these boxes, and there are 5 of them, as I said. And this may take a little bit, but it doesn't matter. I'm not going to get into extraordinary detail. I just want to tell you that they exist and tell you what they are and turn it over to you. It goes without saying that any discussion of Russian operas, especially 5 box sets full of them, is going to be for the more hardcore viewer/listener. That's just because of what it is. I mean, none of these boxes have, for example, librettos, and you can find them easily enough online, But seriously, I mean, if you're going to really understand what's going on in opera, you need to have a libretto. Also, a lot of them feature historical recordings because a lot of these pieces are unfamiliar or not the composer's best known pieces, and they're not all that well known even in Russia. And so I haven't been recorded that often even in Russia. So there's limitations to what you can get. And you have to be able to put up with, Russian singers and historical recordings and sonics, and, So you will know who you are if this is something for you. But I still want to talk about it because it's some really, really good music and important repertoire. And you should know. You should know it's out there. And it's one of those things where when you have some time, tons of it will be on YouTube. You can dip in and dip out and, sort of experience whatever you want and see if it doesn't strike you. I bet a lot of it does. So we're going to start, first of all, with this box. This is the complete operas, fragments, and incidental music by Tchaikovsky. And it's on the Profil label. These are all old Melodia recordings, basically licensed Melodia material for the most part. And there are like lots of CDs in here. 20, 30 something CDs. It's hard to see because as usual with these things, let me see if I can get an angle on it and see what it says. Yeah, 22 CDs, something like that. Well, let's open it and see what we get. Well, here we are. We get a lovely booklet and we get a big pile of CDs in the box. But I can tell you right now, let's see what it says if this is in the booklet. Oh, here is the booklet. And here we go. Yeah. Okay. So here are all the CDs. And these are done by date, believe it or not. And they go up through, let's see, it's 1936, it seems, to 1963. And nothing sounds as grotty as a 1936 Soviet recording of anything. So you're going to have to put up with it. There are 22 CDs. And you ready? Here comes the list. You get the opera Voyevoda, and based on Ostrovsky. Ostrovsky was the guy who wrote Janacek's, Katya Kabanova, and which was Ostrovsky's The Storm. At least I think that's who it was. One of those guys. But that's famous, and that's all on CD 1, and it's not quite complete. It's just got like bits of things. Yes, Overture, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, something like that. But it takes 71 minutes. Maybe it's complete in 71 minutes. Frankly, I have only heard Voyevoda, well, maybe 2 or 3 times. I had this recording back in the old LP days, and it was on 2 discs at that time, so that's why I'm thinking. But I never really bothered to see how long it was. Next, we get Undine. And we get Undine and Mandragora and Oprichnik. These are 3 fragments of operas that were not complete. And they are, like everything Tchaikovsky wrote. It's Tchaikovsky. Doesn't everyone love Tchaikovsky? Just listen to Tchaikovsky. Did they give you the recording date for this? I'm trying to see. Recorded, yeah, 1948. Yeah, let's see what these were then. This is handy. Recorded 1952 was Voyevoda. Undine is 63. And the Oprichnik is, let's see, Oprichnik, Act 2. Oprichnik, I think you get all of Oprichnik. Yes, Oprichnik is the whole thing. That's the whole opera. And it has 4 acts, and it was recorded in, I don't know. Doesn't even say. I mean, it says somewhere here, but if I can't find it, I'm not going to worry about it. Yes, 48. Yes, also 48. It's too complicated. It's just too complicated. It is what it is. And then we get. Let's see, what's this thing? Cherevitsky. Yes, the first version of which was Vakula the Smith. And let's see, it's 1948 as well. I mean, the conductor of these things, Alexander Melik-Pesheyev, was a great operatic conductor. You can read about him in Galina Vishnevskaya's autobiography. She loved the man. He was just a tremendous artist, and he did do a great Boris Godunov, in which she appeared. And let's see here, we've got, Cherevitsky, to Act 2, Act 3. Yes, you get all that. Then we get Eugene Onegin, finally one we've heard of. So let's talk about who the cast is, if it's anybody we know. This was recorded in 1936. So this is very, very classic. Very, 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 very classic Russian singers from the golden age of Russian singing. I have no idea if that's true, but someone will tell you that, so, you know. Okay, so who we got here? We've got Lenski is Sergei Lemeshev. And let's see, German, who cares? Tatiana. Tatiana is Glafira Zhukovskaya. The unbelievable Glafira Zhukovskaya. My goodness. And who else do we need to know? Do we need to know anybody else? Well, we should know who Onegin is, right? Who's singing Onegin? Eugene Onegin, baritone. Oh, here we go. I left him out on purpose because I have no idea how to pronounce this. No, it's his name is Panteleimon Nortzov. I really wish they would put these in Cyrillic. It's easier for me to read it in Cyrillic. It really is, because the transliterations are often like weird. But okay, so this is a classic Bolshoi. This is all Bolshoi stuff from 1936. CD9, The Maid of Orleans. That's Schiller's play. You know, Joan of Arc. Everyone did Schiller's Joan of Arc. I mean, Verdi did it. Giovanna d'Arco. So you can compare the two. I actually like Tchaikovsky's Joan of Arc. I really do. I've always liked it. It's really kind of fun. I mean, it's silly. You know, I mean, remember, Joan of Arc spent most of her military career as a guy, so the whole business of the love interest is a little bit weird. I mean, she obviously, you know, was able to pass as a crusader or a knight or something like that, and nobody noticed. So you wouldn't think, you know, when they start singing about, you know, the moonlight on her lips and how gorgeous she is, you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. But what the heck? It's a good piece. It's really a good piece. And then there's Mazeppa. Now, Mazeppa, I like Mazeppa. There's that really good DG recording conducted by Nimi Yarvi. This one is from 1949, and Mazeppa's fun. It's just fun. It's noisy. It's militant. There's lots of screaming in it. I mean, there's nothing not to like about Mazeppa. And then we get, let's see, Mazeppa. Oh, you get Mazeppa 1, Mazeppa. Oh, yeah, okay, fine. And then we have the Enchantress. Ooh, when was the last time you heard the Enchantress? It's enchantingly Enchantress. And, you know, there's lots of good orchestral music in these pieces, too. There's battles, there's dances, there's waltzes. You know, it's all vintage Tchaikovsky, or a lot of it is. Now, this was recorded in 1954. And, again, it's not going to help to give you the list of singers you've never heard of. But you should know that Tchaikovsky wrote the Enchantress. And then we get, the Queen of Spades, based on Pushkin. I think this is Tchaikovsky's operatic masterpiece. I really do. It is a great, great, great work. It needs to be kept moving. It doesn't play itself. But boy, is it a good story. And the music is just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And let's see, who plays things. Lisa is Xenia Dzerzhinskaya, and oh my God, I just look through these names and I just go to myself, okay. Herman is Nikandar Kanayev, and this was recorded in 1937. Ooh, that's going to be a project getting through that one. I actually just played some of it. It is a project getting through that one. And then we get, let's see, Iolanta, which was originally written to be part of a double bill with none other than the Nutcracker. Iolanta is about a girl who's blind and then she isn't, or she can see and then she's blind, or there's a miracle. Something happens like that. It's short, it's charming, it's delightful. And this was recorded in 1952. And the conductor is Nikolai Golovanov, who's done a bunch of these things too. Golovanov was that wild man, an absolute wild man in his orchestral recordings. He was the guy who was famous for doing Liszt tone poems and Scriabin's orchestral music and making it sound like it meant something. And that is really an achievement. He was absolutely out there as a conductor. He'd fast and slow and up and down, and on stage he had to be a little bit more sedate because, you know, people had to keep up with him and they had to sing, but he was still a very passionate and exciting and wonderful dramatic conductor. So then you get a bonus Romeo and Juliet duet scene from 63, and bits of the Queen of Spades that were like fragments of other things. And then we get, the Snow Maiden. This is incidental music, Snigarachka, because as you know, Snegarachka is a full-fledged opera by none other than Rimsky-Korsakov. But Tchaikovsky wrote quite extensive incidental music. It's very, very beautiful. It's been recorded separately. And this particular version is from 1951 with Alexander Gauck, who's another wonderful Russian conductor. You do get to hear just wonderful, wonderful casts and conductors. And it's the Bolshoi Orchestra. Well, this is the USSR State Radio Symphony Orchestra and Chorus. But it really is wonderful to get to know these artists too. I mean, that's why, I mean, these sets, they're inexpensive. You get a gazillion CDs and you just dip into them once in a while and see what's there. And then let's see what else we get. We get incidental music to Hamlet, you know, the overture, which was eventually morphed into the big symphonic poem. And the Hamlet music's got a lot of good stuff in it too. And it's considerable. It's large. There's a lot of numbers in it. There's 16 numbers at least, plus an overture. And this is also Alexander Gauck from 1951. So those are the Tchaikovsky operas. Next. Wow. Put it up there. We get, no, not these. Oh, here they are. Okay, let me get all this stuff in the correct order, because that's critically important. Prokofiev operas. This is the Gergie box. All of his Prokofiev operas were condensed into this handy-dandy box. And I have to say, Prokofiev's operas are also terribly underrated. I've seen now 3 of them, 4 of them, yeah, and they were all terrific. I saw The Love for Three Oranges, I saw The Gambler, I saw War and Peace. That's the one in the Met where someone like slid off the stage and almost got killed, and The Fiery Angel. Oh, is that a hot opera? That is just hot, hot stuff. And there are 6 operas in here. And they are well worth getting to know if you like your Prokofiev. We get, well, first, Betrothal in a Monastery, also known as the Duenna or the Landlady, which is based on, who wrote that? Sheridan. And it's just I think it's an old story by Sheridan. And then we get The Fiery Angel, which is just, oh my God, there's that fabulous scene where you know, Renata and what's his name, who's chasing Renata, is running around because she's satanically possessed, and they go to a cafe, and at the next table, Faust and Satan are having pastries, and you know, Faust swallows this child who's being obnoxious. It's just fabulous, and it ends with demonic possession in a monastery, and that's, you know, it does ever since, you know, Meyerbeer's Robert le Diable, where you have the ballet of the resurrected dead nuns. You know, satanic possession in monasteries is just operatic gold, absolutely. And then we have The Gambler, which was also great. I mean, you know, Gergiev brought Kirov to the Met, and he did a bunch of these operas, and they were wonderful. They were just wonderful productions, fun to watch, and they had wonderful Russian singers, and Gergiev seemed to actually care and be engaged, which has since ceased to be the case. But in those days, yes. And then we get The Love for Three Oranges, which is the one Prokofiev opera people knew about. And my sister Jody, who was doing a year abroad when she was in London, got to see it at Covent Garden. And it was a scratch and sniff production, by the way, just like the fantastic tinnitus classic original Beethoven Fifth, which is also a scratch and sniff production. But that was a very well received, very imaginative production that she actually called me from London to tell me all about, because she had a choice. She said, we have a choice. You can see The Love for Three Oranges, or we can see The Return of Ulysses by Monteverdi. I said, go see The Love for Three Oranges if it's your first shot at, you know, going to see an opera. Or, you know, with your second shot. I mean, she and I had been going, but I mean, you know, if you're not really an opera person, you do not want to go with Monteverdi. Go see The Love for Three Oranges, and she loved it. It was wonderful. And then we have Semyon Kotko, which is, I think, like Prokofiev's last opera. It's a very socialist, realist type thing. And finally, War and Peace, which many regard as Prokofiev's operatic masterpiece, if not his masterpiece. And the competition for this performance is, of course, the Rostropovich with Vishnevskaya, which I have to say, frankly, I prefer a little bit. I really do. I think it just has a little bit more Russianosity to it, you know? But this is a wonderful box, and it's still around, at least last time I checked. See, it even says Decca, so they de-Philip-sized it and made it Decca, and they're great to have. They're wonderful, wonderful things. And I really have to say, you know, the Bonanza, which was the classical music industry from the 70s through the 90s or so, when they were just recording everything witlessly. I mean, this is the result of it. These are the remains. And it's only a matter of time before some of this stuff disappears. Granted, it may get re-released for download or something like that, but if you want physical product, if you want to have like the choice to thumb through things or read a booklet and find out what bits may interest you or where you want to dip in and sample, you have to get these things while you can. That's why I'm going through them now, just to point out that they're available, and if they're no longer available, that they existed once, so you know what to look out for. I mean, this is a public service. So, we've done Tchaikovsky, we've done Prokofiev, and I want to point out that there is also a complete Mussorgsky box on Profil, which I'm going to do separately, because Mussorgsky is a whole another kettle of beans, because everything he did was just such a mess. You know, everything is, aside from, you know, Boris Godunov, everything is fragmentary and partially finished and reconstructed. And so I actually need to spend a lot more time with that box and really see what it is before I do a video. Here I feel comfy sort of winging it because I've heard everything in here and can just sort of buzz through it. So who does that leave us with? You know who it leaves us with. Rimsky-Korsakov. Now, I made a passionate plea for Rimsky-Korsakov's operas in my recent talk about the opera suites, because, my God, that's great music. It's fantastic. But Rimsky-Korsakov was, first and foremost, an opera composer. And, you know, snooty, hotshot, soi-disant opera people in the West often say, well, he was kind of a failure, and, you know, he didn't create believable characters, and bleppity, 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 blep. And the reason they say that is because they haven't heard the damn things. And if you haven't heard the damn things, then you're not in a position to talk about them. In order to determine the viability of an opera, first of all, you have to listen to it, preferably in more than one performance where that's possible, which it isn't always in these cases. Second of all, you have to see a sympathetic staging, so you know how well it actually works on stage in the theater. And finally, last but certainly not least, you have to pay attention to what the texts are and see how the music and the text interrelate and how the composer has set the language, which Rimsky-Korsakov did with extreme care. He did some of his own librettos. He was a very smart man, and his operas are wonderful marriages of words and music. And I will say something else, because when you see the stuff on stage, when you see it actually done, a lot makes sense that doesn't make sense when you hear the orchestral music away from the operatic situations in which it was originally designed, for which it was originally designed. One thing that we notice about Rimsky-Korsakov, first of all, he loves to have quiet endings all the time, which is sort of, and second of all, he seems to, superficially, I think, to have a slightly defective sense of timing, because a lot of the orchestral music is just accompaniment. And if you don't have the vocal parts, you know, there's a lot of underlying ostinato and repetition that seems to go on forever, but it doesn't when it's actually done in context. And I think that that is really, really important. Now, once you know the context, actually, you can just take that away and listen to the stuff without the vocal parts, and it gives a whole different picture as to what's going on and what's really happening, and what your subjective perception of how long it lasts is. And that's me. That's just my experience of it. But I want to talk about these 3 Rimsky boxes. Now, this one is the opera edition on Capriccio, which was on Capriccio, if it's still around. These were all done with remember these? The Bulgarian Radio Symphony Orchestra under various people. Well, some of them were. It's the Bulgarian Radio Symphony Orchestra under Stoyan Angelov, and then the Cologne Radio Symphony Orchestra with Alexander Lazarev, and the Sofia National Opera Orchestra under Dmitry Manilov. Remember all that stuff from Bulgaria? Some of it showed up here, but this was later. Originally, you got the stuff, it was on Sony, which at that point was Columbia. There was some kind of licensing arrangement, and they did Glinka operas, and they had Khovanshchina and Boris Godunov. They did Mussorgsky operas, and they did a bunch of Rimsky-Korsakov operas. They were rather nicely packaged and nice, bulky. In the early days of CD, you could get them that way. But anyway, you have in this box 1, 2, 3, 4 separate operas on 8 CDs. You get Snigarachka, the Snow Maiden. You get May Night, which is really, really beautiful. You get the Golden Cockerel, and you get Boyarina Vereshchaloga. Now, Boyarina Vereshchaloga was originally the prologue of an earlier opera. I think it was The Maid of Pskov, or one of those operas. And Rimsky later extracted it on revision and turned it into its own opera. And that is one of the issues with Rimsky's operas, because he revised some of them, and they exist in multiple versions, which is the guaranteed kiss of death in terms of getting the thing actually produced. The only thing people like less than operas in strange languages like Russian, about things you haven't heard of, is when you have multiple sources which require some musicological work to actually make them performable. Nobody wants to be bothered with that. I wish composers would figure that out. You're better off with an unrevised failure than with something that has been revised and changed but not necessarily improved, because you never know. The revisions are not always an improvement. Look at what that did to Don Carlo. I mean, the only reason Don Carlo has always sort of lagged behind some of the other great Verdi operas is because no one knows which version to play. I mean, do you do it in French? Do you do it in Italian? Do you do it in 4 acts? Do you do it in 5 acts? If you do it in 4 acts, you add some of the bits from the 5 acts. And if you also do it in 4 acts, which ending do you use? And it's a big pain in the tuchus. And you know, opera is expensive and difficult enough without it being a pain in the tuchus. So anyway, these are the Capriccio recordings. Most of them are quite good. They're quite good, and they may still be available, you know, either singly or in a box. So that's one way that these things have survived before major labels got their hands on them. So next, there is, of course, the Gergie Avrimsky Box, which is great. It's really great. It's not necessarily better than some of these other versions, but it was available. You know, distribution is everything, and it was a discovery for a lot of people I know to be able to get these. And I remember the nice blue boxes, and we got to meet some really fine singers as a result. And in this particular box, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 operas. Yeah, it even says 5 operas. And I you know, if you don't have this, then you're really missing something. You get Casce the Immortal. Now, Casce the Immortal is a one-actor, and Casce was a wizard sorcerer guy, and as you may know, he was the bad guy in Stravinsky's The Firebird. It's the same source, so you may want to hear this. that may tell you something interesting. And then we have The Legend of the Invisible City of Kitej and the Maiden Fevronia. I mean, that's why no one hears that one, because the title is too long to fit on a billboard or one of those playbills, you know, The Legend of the Invisible City of Kitej and the Maiden Fevronia. There's another one of these operas that's like 4 times longer than that. It's, you know, it's like I forget which one it is. I mean, it might be Tsar Sultan. It might be the tale of Tsar Sultan and his son and how he gets lost in a boat and everything happens and God knows, you know. There were some ways in which Rimsky-Korsakov was just not the best at his own PR and marketing. But The Invisible City of Kitej is widely regarded as Rimsky-Korsakov's operatic masterpiece, and a masterpiece it is. You really should hear it. First, listen to the suite, and then just imagine that for the next 3 hours, well, with a lot more variety. It's gorgeous, glorious piece. And then we have The Maid of Pskov, which is also just delightful. And then Sadko. Oh, Sadko. Sadko is so cool. Sadko is big and colorful, and oh God, it's wonderful. And finally, The Tsar's Bride, which I think was Rimsky's first opera, but he revised it later, so it was no longer his first opera. You know, Rimsky-Korsakov wrote every kind of opera. There are one-act operas. There are light operetta-like operas. There was Mozart and Salieri, you know, which is, you know, sort of faux neoclassical. He did all of this stuff. He wrote tragedies, but most of all, he wrote fairy tales. And nobody was better at fairy tales than Rimsky-Korsakov was. Absolutely no one. Big, glittery, complicated, senseless, musically glorious fairy tales. And you can get all of them in the Profil box, which is just like the Tchaikovsky box. It's all Bolshoi stuff, historical recordings from 1927 to 1963. Note the date, 1963. I think this is for copyright reasons. This is all public domain stuff. That's why we can get these. This is a big set. This is the complete operas and fragments on, let's see, how many CDs are in here? This is 25 or 28 or something like that. It's a lot of stuff. It's really a lot of stuff. I think there are about 15 operas that Rimsky wrote in various versions. And of course, you don't get every version of everything in here because that's 25 CDs. Thank God. It's a nice, big, readable type. And I'm going to tell you which ones you get here. And again, we're not going to worry so much about, you know, titles and, I mean, singers and performers, because they just are what they are. And you have to deal with them. So first, you get the Maid of Pskov, which is Pskovitianka. Yes, Pskovitianka, the Maid of Pskov. And this was recorded in, it doesn't say for this one. I don't know why. Why doesn't it say? No, they don't give you dates on these. They did on the other ones, in the other booklet. Well, maybe they're afraid. It's possible. All right, then we're not going to worry about it. Well, who's the conductor? Then we sort of know. Let's see, Semyon Sakharov. Okay, that doesn't tell me anything. But May Night, based on Gogol. Great story, great opera, which was 1880 and just recorded 1946 for May Night. They put it in a different spot, the recording date. 1947 was the Maid of Pskov, and May Night is Golovanov from 46. And then we get Snegarachka, which is all just a great opera, folks. Also one of Rimsky's, you know, top 5 or 6 of them. And this is recorded 57, which is wonderful. And then we have more of Snigarachka. That's actually been recorded a few times. It's not hard to find because it's popular. It's about a girl. She's made of snow. She melts. You know the story. Let's see. Mlada. Oh, thank God, Mlada. See, Mlada still needs a fully modern recording, but happily for us, but this is with Svetlanov's performance from 1962, Intolerable Sound, because there's got to be a complete Mlada. You know, Act 3, we talked about it. It's the Night on Mount Triglav that Stravinsky ripped off for the Infernal Dance in the Firebird. And it is an extraordinary score. It's an opera ballet. It's full of orchestral music and choral singing and all kinds of stuff. Oh, it's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Mlada, by the way, is dead for the entire opera. I think I mentioned that before. She's dead, but she's a ghost, and she takes revenge on the woman who killed her to get the guy. You know, that's the story, essentially. Sadko is, well, we'll get to Sadko. Christmas Eve. Oh, what a beautiful orchestral suite that is with that fabulous Polonaise. This was recorded in 48. This is with Golovanov. And let's see, it's Christmas Eve. Okay, then we get Sadko. Sadko. Sadko is about, just so you know, aside from, just, the usual symphonic poem, it's about a Bylina player, he's a folk musician, who goes on a whole bunch of adventures and comes back rich. And that's what happens in Sadko. And each act takes place like someplace else, and it's a magic fairy tale thing. But oh, so much beautiful music. Oh, so much beautiful music. Unbelievably beautiful music. Then we get Mozart and Salieri, based on the Pushkin story. This is let's see, recorded in '63 with the Leningrad Symphony Orchestra. This says the Leningrad Symphony Orchestra of Philharmonia. I don't know what that is. Under Edward Grigorovich. There are a few performances of Mozart and Salieri that came out, especially after Amadeus. Everyone went back and decided to do the Pushkin original. Then they realized Rimsky-Korsakov made an opera out of it. And so a bunch of them popped up, and you might still find some of them sitting around. And there's a bonus of Fyodor Chaliapin doing fragments from Mozart and Salieri. But it's a short piece. It's like 40 minutes long. It's just, fun. Pushkin was the guy who originated the idea that Salieri poisoned Mozart. This is where it all came from. You should pay attention to that. Then we get the Tsar's Bride. This is from 1958, and it's live with Svetlanov. Let's see, the Tsar's Bride. There's all that stuff. And then there's like a bonus, too. There's bonus stuff here. I don't know why. At the end of Act 1, and okay, fine. There's like extra. And then we have Tsar Sultan. Oh, there you go. The home of the flight of the bumblebee. What could be better than that? That's wonderful. That was composed in 1900. This is another live recording from 1956 with the Mariinsky Opera Chorus and Orchestra under Sergei Yeltsin. So this is well before Gergiev got his tentacles on the artistic organization there. But Tsar Sultan with the Mariinsky. What's bad? Then we get, Vera Shaloga and Nausicaa and Sevilla. Oh my God, Sevilla was Rimsky-Korsakov's biggest flop. That's an opera that takes, Sevilla, if you saw I, Claudius, Sevilla's one of those. It's one of those old Roman Empire, treachery and debauchery operas. And apparently it didn't go very well. So those are in here. I'm trying to see how much of it we get. Let's see. So you get the prologue is, yes, the Maid of Pskov. I got it right. Was the noblewoman Vera Shaloga, and this is from '47. And then there's Nausicaa, 2 fragments from the Odyssey of Homer. See, yeah, Rimsky-Korsakov got around. He really did. And this is with Golovanov. And then finally, Sevilla. You only have here 4 fragments because it's never been recorded. You can't have, even a classic recording. So these are just bits. The more popular arias, or at least the arias people were willing to sing. I wouldn't call them popular. But there's a whole opera, for Sevilla, and also the Boyarina Vera Shaloga. And Nausicaa, I think, remained fragments, maybe. But who knows? Who knows? And then we have, let's see, Koschei the Immortal. We just talked about him. This is another live recording. Is it a live recording? No, it's the USSR Radio Symphony Orchestra under Samuel Samosud. And then we get Pan Voyevoda. This is in memoriam Frederick Chopin, believe it or not. It's not quoting Chopin, but it's a Polish story. It's one of those Polish dynastic stories where everybody kills everybody else. And this is 1951, and it says, let's see, on a Polish subject that would pay tribute to his beloved Frederick Chopin. Yes, he used the motives from some of his works. Now, I've listened to Pan Voyevoda, and I've listened to Chopin. And yes, there are moments that sound Polish and that sound somewhat Chopin-esque, but he's not copying, is my point. He's not out there to show you that he knows his Chopin. So this is actually a fun piece too, but the suite is wonderful because it's got all those Polish dances. You get your mazurkas and your polonaise and all that stuff. It's a wonderful dance suite. Then we get The Legend of the Invisible City of Kitezh and the Maiden Fevronia. Yeah. And this one is with Vasily Nebelsin with the USSR Radio Symphony Orchestra and Choir from 1956. So it sounds tolerable. The Golden Cockerel. This is 1951 with Alexander Gauck. This was a classic. This Melodia one, I remember getting it like, one of those, I think it was one of my Goodwill purchases when I was like 10 or something like that. I got it for about 10 cents or something. And I remember all these people screaming at me in Russian, and I loved every minute of it. It was so much fun. And that's the end of it. That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of Rimsky. he is quite the guy as an opera composer. And like I said, here it is, inexpensive. You get what you get, you know, sonically and otherwise. You really ought to get this, which is fantastic and still available. Last time I checked, the Gergie Box. If you're a real hardcore, you'll want the Profil Box. If you want to fill in some things, some of these are quite good as well. The Capriccio Box. There's really more stuff out there. There's a lot of individual recordings of some of these pieces too. But, you know, you have to look for them. You have to know what they are and you have to want them. But I'm just trying to make the point that this is really, it's a wonderful, rich, varied repertoire. It's a world. It's a whole thing worth exploring. And it's not overrepresented on disc. It hasn't been over-recorded and exposed to death. And so it's a real voyage of discovery for those of you who are the real intrepid searchers after musical gems. You cannot do better than to start looking into these Russian operas by Tchaikovsky and Rimsky and Prokofiev, and eventually some of the weird bylines of Mussorgsky. There's Taneyev's Orestaya, which is a masterpiece. There's some beautiful, beautiful stuff. Of course, you know, the Glinka operas. Then we'll have to do something on Dargo Mishki or one of those guys at some point. I don't want to go crazy. You've got four, right? We've got Prokofiev and Mussorgsky and Rimsky and Tchaikovsky. That's a really good group. And between them, you've got a good couple of dozen operas that are worth looking into, and you can spend the rest of your life trying to find them and getting the texts and listening to the best bits and having some fun. It really is fun. One of the happiest things that I ever did as a music lover and collector, hardcore collector, was to go into the joys of Russian opera. They are wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.